Our guest is actually a neighbor of ours, works right down the hall, Barry Marcus, Watchmaker. Barry wrote a book. Barry, welcome. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming down.
Pleasure to be here.
We pass by each other in the hallway every day, and this is the first time you've been on the air with us here at WMRC.
Very first.
Let's talk about you as a watchmaker. How did you get into watches? Why did that excite you? How long have you been doing it?
I have been doing it for 70 years.
70 years, wow.
My great-grandfather, grandfather, father, uncle, and a bunch of cousins were all watchmakers. After World War II, 3 poor guys who married into the family became watchmakers.
Really?
They sat me down when I was 10 years old, and without exaggeration, I knew 20 minutes later I'd be doing watches the rest of my life.
They actually sat you down, they pitched it to you like...
No, they just sat me down and put a watch in my hand. It was a 7-jewel Waltham pocket watch. Great big thing.
Yeah.
And that was it.
What was it about that watch that was in your hand at that moment?
I don't know. I just knew that from that day forth, I would be repairing watches.
Was it the artwork? Was it the mechanics? What turned you on to watches initially?
I never knew.
You know,
it was not the
just
artwork.
that feeling?
It was a very plain, basic movement.
Yep.
7-jewel, the cheapest of their movements.
Okay.
They weren't. I don't think they wanted to put a good one in my hand at that age, but just something about it. As I said, 4th generation, something was in it. It clicked. That's all I ever wanted to do.
Now, 70 years ago, I would imagine the profession was common.
Very common.
Not as common these days.
Very rare today.
People still wear watches, though.
Everybody wears watches, and as the heart of the book is the fact that many watches are very personal treasures.
Yes.
People wear watches that were handed down generation to generation. I have one watch I see occasionally that literally was engraved where the owners went. The first engraving is San Juan Hill.
Everywhere they went, they got an engraving on the watch.
Battles. This is a family of military people.
Wow.
San Juan Hill, several of the big battles, World War I. The watch went ashore with an American in North Africa, fought in Italy, in France, caught up in the Battle of the Bulge, then went to Korea, all the way to the Yalu River and back. There was an engraving for Saigon.
Wow.
And Baghdad, back in the Gulf War, and Afghanistan was the last engraving. There's no more room.
Wow.
And I always said that watch would make a 1-year history course at West Point.
It certainly would, right? And I guess that's the idea behind the book that you wrote, Watches I Have Known.
I wrote the book for my grandchildren.
Okay.
These are stories, my life, what I've done. I wrote and wrote and wrote and doodled on the computer until my daughters decreed that I had written a book.
It's a great book, too. I mean, this is, usually when somebody puts out a local book, you can't expect too much, but this is like a real book.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm quite flattered.
What was the process like, writing your own book, releasing your own book, finding the company to support it?
To be very honest, I doodled on the computer. In my own mind, I was doodling at the computer to avoid watching TV. It grew and grew, and then my daughters decreed a book.
Okay.
I was the last one to accept the concept of a book.
They were putting it out regardless.
It was going to go.
Yeah.
They encouraged it. They said, keep going. I would print on several pages on my own printer, and it was good. The only thing we edited was for privacy's sake. The only town that actually exists is Milford.
Okay.
Everything else was changed.
Everything else was changed. Names
In my
were changed?
writings, I had people's names. Those were changed.
Okay. All right, let's go back 70 years. Where were you 70 years ago when you started?
Massachusetts.
You were in Worcester, okay.
Yep. My dad had opened a jewelry store down the street here, but I was in school in Worcester. I went to my uncle's store every day after school, which was its own adventures. Learned the trade.
So your uncle had a store, and your father had a store
in Worcester.
Yep.
My father opened here, and eventually I became a Milfordian.
Sure.
When my grandfather came from Lithuania, he opened his store in downtown Worcester, off of downtown Worcester, on Millbury Street.
Yep.
And this is what the family does.
So you have always worked here. Your business has always been here in Milford?
Always in Milford, yeah.
How far has a watch come? I mean, you talked about the engravings on that one watch, but as far as somebody coming in from the outside handing you the watch, how far have people traveled to come see you?
My first word is to say, unfortunately, because of the shortage of watchmakers, I've had people drive down from Lawrence and up from central Connecticut and from Rhode Island. And right now I'm finishing up a watch that was mailed in from Alabama.
Wow.
So it's not a good situation. But watch repair is like a lot of trades that have disappeared.
Yep. I mean, that's good for you, because when you need your watch fixed, you got to call Barry.
It's good for me, but having admitted I started learning at 10, and I've been doing it 70 years, when you do the arithmetic, there aren't that many 80-year-old people working 50 hours a week.
That's true. But you must be able to do it with your eyes closed, having been doing it for 70 years.
No, you do have to keep at least one eye open. It's a requirement. I enjoy the work.
You enjoy working?
I enjoy. Okay. I love it. Many times I'm here on the weekend.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Your
shop
is always
avoid boredom.
Open. Yeah.
TV can be boring. I'll come here and fix a couple of good watches, and it's fun.
Do you have enough work to keep you that busy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the watches are quite complicated.
Are they?
Very, very complicated. When you see a watch, I have a wry comment I make on some watches. I call them octopus watches. That's how many hands they have.
Okay. Well, how many hands could you have on a watch? You got the
6, 7.
6 or 7 hands?
You got a second hand, a sweep hand, a minute hand, an hour hand, a running second hand, which is one that always goes. You can have a hand that will tell you how many tenths of a second on the timers, how many minutes, and up to 12 hours.
Wow.
Plus a day and a date.
Yep. And all this is in this little...
all this is what's on the wrist.
Yep. That's amazing. Do you see more newer watches or older watches at this point?
I see a large number of the older watches because they were made to last.
Yep.
There is a couple of watches around Milford that I see people bringing in that were from the Civil War.
Wow.
Especially in a model 1857 Waltham. They were supposed to last this long. That's a surprising thing. Even way back then, no telephones, no light bulbs, no electric motors, everything done by water power up in Waltham. And they were supposed to last this long.
And that's like everything. You know, back in the day, it was made to last. Seems like things that are produced today are not made to last. Or they try to.
I think that if many of today's articles were made with the ability to be repairable, they would be unaffordable.
Yeah.
There would be so much. Like a 35-inch TV you can buy for $395.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, it's gone.
Right. You got to go buy another one.
It costs $1,300, $1,400 if it was made up of individual replaceable components.
That's true. These companies today want that repeat business. So, you know, buy our TV for a year and then upgrade, or once it breaks, get a new one and keep coming back.
As the book illustrates, can become mom, dad who are no longer with us, grandparents. They can be memories of horrendous experiences during a war. And the fellow who says, we went into the Pacific when his plane was shot down, he's talking the watch because he still has it.
Yeah.
And the minute goes by, I've heard the expression several times, I have come to appreciate each minute can be a bonus.
Wow.
Yeah, 7 days in the life raft. The watch kept going.
Yep.
And he kept going, and they're still together.
Well, I kept track of where you were at what time, and it helped you count the minutes, so to speak.
What they do mostly is tell you what to do when.
Yeah.
If the watch is off, you missed the first couple of minutes of your TV show. You missed the murder being committed. You don't know what the show's about.
That's right.
When I was a youngster, we were always trained. The mechanical error that would be built into the watch had to be such that the watch was a little fast. In Worcester, you caught the trolley and the bus on time to get to work. Because back then, you better be on work on time.
Right.
Then there was the radio program starting. You wanted to get a little earlier than a couple of minutes in.
Right.
And the watch directed people.
It was a necessity back then.
It's a necessity today to know the time.
Well, it is.
We use
You're right, but there's so many different sources
to tell the time.
Right.
But you have to know the time.
But as far as a watch goes, a necessity then, more of an accessory today, the newer watches?
The newer watches are high tech. They won't last anywhere near as long.
Yeah.
But it's still on the wrist, handy.
Yep. Even somebody driving can just flip his wrist and see what time it is. If you start trying to dig for the cell phone to get that going, you could be off the road. That's true. I rely too much on mine. Yeah. I rely too much on mine.
Yeah, that can happen.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely. Rob's got a question.
Yeah. Who makes the best watch?
Who makes the best watch?
Very few of the brands today, outside of an Omega or Rolex, Citizen and Seiko, actually make their own movements from scratch. As in the old days, they made everything from designing the movement, and they own the factory that made the case. Citizen is quite good. They sell their movements to whoever wants to buy them and makes up the package. You could go into the watch business buying movements and cases and putting your name on the dial. But certain traditional names like Rolex, Omega, Bulova, they're still there, keeping the quality up.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll talk more with Barry Marcus, Watchmaker. He's right down the hall from us here. That's where his shop is located, and he's got a new book, Watches I Have Known. We'll talk more about that when we get back on Living for the Weekend. First Class Radio, WMRC, WMRCDailyNews.com. It's Living for the Weekend. We're going to be playing some tracks off the new Lame 2 CD to benefit the Oliva Fund for Cancer Care at Milford Regional Medical Center. We'll be doing that a little bit later on. Right now, my guest in studio, Barry Marcus. His book is Watches I Have Known. He's got a shop right down the hall from us here at WMRC. Julie Campisi, is that...
my daughter.
That's your daughter?
Number 2, the middle one.
She's the one that saw the writing on the computer said, that's it, Dad, you got to get it on.
They all saw, the three of them, Carol, Julie, and Amy, saw my doodling.
Yeah.
And I insisted on calling it my doodling. And realized that I had written a book. They decided and decreed that I had written a book. And there was great encouragement. And it was pushed. And it's a book.
And the book is all about stories you have heard?
No. It's the watches that I have repaired. And what I realized early on was many stores were interested in selling a new product and did not recognize the meaning, personal meaning, a particular watch can have for somebody, irregardless of value. And I discovered they were telling me why it was important.
Well, somebody's going to come in with a watch, and because this is my story. I went to the mall once to get a battery changed.
Yeah.
And the kid at the kiosk looked at the watch and said, you might as well just get a new one. This one's junk. Well, it was my grandfather's. He had just died, and it was passed on to me. So you have to be careful when somebody is giving you that watch. No matter how it looks, it's still a piece of history. It still means something to somebody. And everything has a story, like in this book, Watches I Have Known.
And your what you just said could have been 2-3 paragraphs in the book, because I was trained as a kid to recognize that personal meaning.
Yeah.
And early in the book, there's a little bit about my getting my head handed to me when I laughed at an elderly man who wanted a nothing much watch repaired, and I was informed that because I was a little kid of 15 and he was only 45, he was not old. At the time, he was a World War I veteran.
Yep.
The watch had been a present from his wife when he came back from the trenches. Not an expensive watch. I laughed at it.
Yeah.
And I got a very stern lecture on that meaning
Yep.
of that watch to that man. That was his last tie to the wife.
Yep.
Or the grandfather.
Sure.
In your case, you said the word grandfather.
Yep. Yep.
We have this story of the watch that I admired. It was an 18-karat gold European-made watch that a person drove to Milford to have repaired. And I noted he was on a tour of Europe, and he shook his head no. And sad to say, but truth to say, his answer was that SS Colonel had no further use for it.
Oh, go right ahead. That's okay. We're very informal here.
Okay, thank you. That was his story.
Yeah.
He and the German saw each other at the same moment. They both fired. Neither one missed.
Okay.
He was shot lightly. The other man died. When he examined him, he saw the watch, he took it, had no idea what it was. And he said it was a reminder of how close and precious each minute can be.
It was a common practice,
bonus.
wasn't it, back then?
And back then it was a very common practice.
Yeah.
It was a souvenir, a remembrance.
Sure.
A remembrance of some place they would rather not have been in the first place.
Yep. And that's how these things get handed down generation
That's
to generation.
how they get handed down. I have done the timepieces from airplanes stolen by the pilot,
Okay.
including a German Messerschmitt, and the owner's name, first and last, was positively German.
Yeah.
And he still spoke with a German accent, but I didn't have, let's say, the nerve to ask him if that came from his plane.
Yep. So you do clocks, not just watches?
No,
but...
no. Just only watches.
Oh, this was a watch from the plane. Okay.
This was the larger, it was a little larger than a pocket watch.
Yeah.
But I don't do clocks.
Okay. Is it different? Is it that different?
They're large. As a stubborn kid, very, very stubborn kid, I proclaimed to the world I would not do clocks.
Okay.
And in the book is the tale of the one clock I've really done belonged to my grandmother. It was a Westminster chime clock that I refused to fix. So I discovered that if I wanted to keep getting fed, I would fix the clock.
Okay.
I fixed the clock.
And you ate.
And I kept eating. It was a fantastic cook. She made food special for me.
Nice.
So I think I coined the phrase, we'll work for food.
Barry, what's your favorite story in this book? I mean, that's a tough question, seeing that there's so many stories in here.
My favorite story is a young man who found himself holding a Tommy gun on his own grandparents.
Wow.
In Italy.
Okay.
When they broke out of Anzio, which was a butcher shop,
Yeah.
fighting up toward Rome, through villages destroyed, civilians caught up in the battle, killed. As he checked the house, couldn't open the door, so he, with a Tommy gun, blew the lock off and jumped in. And there was no one there but an elderly Italian man and an Italian woman hugging each other, kind of accepting the fact they were dead in the middle of a battle. Americans didn't do that. As he looked around, and I'll quote the book, he got a deep pain in his chest because there was a picture on the wall. he recognized his mother, his father, and himself at age 10.
Wow.
He did not know where he was except Italy.
Yeah.
And he realized it was his grandparents, but he couldn't speak Italian. So his brainstorm was he touched the mother, Mama, and touched himself, then Papa. He did know the word bambino. When he said bambino and patted himself on the chest, Grandma screamed and ran across and almost cracked 2 ribs. The grandfather ran out into the street yelling in Italian. Well, naturally, there's a kid from Brooklyn who was Italian, who spoke Italian,
Yeah.
and his company ran in and said, "What's going on? Some old guy is running around screaming. His grandson is here to save everybody." And then he smiled and said, "You never saw so much wine in your life."
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, and the picture came from Milford. I don't know where they lived.
Yeah.
But that's a favorite because that's a good story.
That's
a
a great story.
heartwarming story.
That's like
Some of them are
a
very
story
sad.
that movies are written about. That's amazing.
Things like that.
And some are
You
sad.
can say it's not possible, but the world is funny.
That's right. You must get a lot of people who are emotionally attached to these watches. And how do you handle that? How do you handle? I mean, you're almost like a therapist.
It's almost, okay, you use the word therapist. It's the fact I got yelled at and accepted the fact that these watches are important to that person.
Everybody that comes in is different too, right? You never know how to read somebody. They could be happy. They could be like, it's just a watch. Or they could have this deep
Unfortunately,
story.
today I have a lot of people that ask me would I be willing to look at it.
Okay.
They've been turned away more than one place.
Really?
That's a tip-off. And I said, would you be willing to look at it? Or someone told me directly they were at a fancy store, high-grade store, forget the word fancy, they were at a high-grade store.
Sure.
That doesn't recognize that nothing much watch is a treasure.
That store may have only been open for 10 years.
Or 30.
You've been at it for 70 years.
I have been trained to recognize the attachment to that watch. In some cases, you got one that's been through all the battles. Some have been through wars. There's one watch I repaired. That's the last story and the last one in the book. It's a watch that was credited with saving the surviving members of a beat-up B-17. All the instruments were shot out, and that particular wristwatch told the pilot that they were already in the air 12 minutes longer than possible, considering the range of the thing.
Right.
He thought that the fact that one of the engines had been shot off reduced fuel consumption.
Yep.
And he managed to land in a field in England.
He figured it out because of his watch.
He knew he'd better get down.
Yeah.
He lowered the altitude, but before he could lower the wheels, the 3 engines conked out. And he landed belly up, no wheels, in a field. Because they were out of gas, there was nothing to blow up. And the 3 men that were alive at the time, that's all that were left in the plane, made it out fine.
Wow.
So here's a watch. I'll quote him, because a lot of these stories stick in my mind. That watch gave him the extra time to survive the war, go home, meet a girl, get married, have children, and now grandchildren.
Wow.
All because of that watch.
That's true. He has the watch to thank.
That's the key.
Wow.
You can't say, don't bother fixing that.
Right. Because that saved his life.
That kept him
and gave
alive.
him
And
so
the
much
other guy
more.
It gave him he said it gave him a life.
You're a watchmaker.
Yeah.
Do you also consider yourself a historian?
I love history on a personal basis, but I wouldn't call it a historian.
You're the keeper of so many stories, though. You're the keeper of so many stories. Some might argue you are a historian.
Okay.
How about an artist?
I wrote them. What?
Artist. Do you consider yourself an artist?
An artisan, maybe, but not an artist.
Okay. All right.
My second granddaughter is the artist who drew the picture on the cover.
Oh yeah, that's
Julie's daughter.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's the inner workings
That's
of a.
based
of a-
on an Elgin pocket watch.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Where can people get this book, Barry?
It's available on Amazon. I have some here in the shop,
Okay.
and I'm going to donate one to the Milford Library,
Oh, nice.
but it can be found on Amazon and Create Space. I have business cards where it can be ordered.
Well, it's a very interesting book. I think it's really
Why,
cool.
thank you.
I think it's cool to pick one up for. I'm going to say somebody older in your life, a grandparent, a father, only because I think first and foremost they would appreciate the stories in this, and then I would say get one for your kids so they can learn to appreciate the stories in this book.
That's a good suggestion for the youngsters.
Yep.
And my grandchildren have been through it. And I have been called from some people that have bought the book and really gotten into it and bought a couple more for Christmas presents.
Yeah.
That I never expected.
Will there be a sequel to the book? Are you still
I
writing?
hope not.
It took so much to get this out.
I don't
right?
think I'm going to make another 70 years to write
Oh,
it.
I don't know about that. Well, this is great. Thank you very much, Barry. Barry Marcus.
I thank you.
Barry is a watchmaker in the building here at the Milford Common building, third floor. Right after you get off the elevator, you're straight ahead.
Off the elevator,
Can't
you
meet
see one door, that's me.
And do you find that you spend a lot of time, more time talking to people, or more time fixing watches these days?
No, I spend more time fixing watches, but I spend all the time necessary with the people. Many times it gives me the idea of how important it is. Sometimes we solve problems talking to people. For example, the person whose wind-up watch will only run several hours.
Yep.
They've had it for 30 or 40 or 50 years. Very often, I solve the problem by looking at the owner.
Yeah.
Their hands have arthritis. They can't grip the crown to wind it.
Ah.
I had a man that had a Rolex automatic, highest there is. It wouldn't run.
Wow.
It was back to the factory 3 times.
Yep.
The minute I saw him, I knew the problem.
Yep.
The gentleman was elderly, using a walker, and with the walker, there was no up and down motion of the hand.
Ah.
So he could have walked from here to Boston and not wound the watch.
I see.
Tech at the factory looks at the watch, that's all he sees.
Yep.
The watch is fine.
Yep.
For anybody except the person who owns it.
Because that's an extension of the watch, and
The watch is on the wrist.
yeah.
And if the wrist is not moving, the watch will not wind.
Becomes a part of you.
Yeah, it
Emotionally
becomes a
and
part of
physically.
you. Yeah, both. And we have a couple of CPAs I've had in the past that are so busy, they're sitting with their hand, the left hand is holding the papers down. They're working hard all day, but
Yeah.
they don't move.
Yep.
The watch may not wind.
One more question before I let
Yes.
you go, Barry. When on the rare occasion that you cannot fix something, how does that affect you? Because I got to feel like
It hurts
you're emotionally
because
invested in these.
it's emotionally attached. I call it kind of an ego.
Yeah.
I want to be the one that get the watch going, which is what the watchmaker wants to do, is to
Yep.
get it going. My uncle gave me the phrase, we may fix watches, but very frequently we are fixing the people. That use of the word people was his word. We were fixing the person.
Yep.
But Uncle Abe said, we are fixing the people.
Wow.
That memory, that tie has been broken.
Yep. You're keeping it going for them.
And you keep it going, you keep the tie going.
All right. Well, we're out of time, so to speak.
And I think the books that I've signed all have been signed with the word time on the inside,
Have they?
printed on the inside cover. I don't know if that one was.
Is that
No,
your?
that's just a signature,
Okay.
Julie and my own. So
I don't know if this is our copy. Tom gave this to me. I hope it's our copy.
I gave it to the station.
Okay, then
That's
I'd love
that.
for you to
Yeah.
sign this before you go. Let me find a good pen here. So Barry, you sign that for me. Oh, you have plenty of pens on you.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Barry Marcus. Thank you. Get
I
the book.
thank
It's
you.
called
I thank
Watches
you.
I've Known.
I thank you.
All right. You have a great day and happy holidays.